Hey, it's Miss Reese. I'm going to be going over the Test 8 review. So I'm going to be doing the left column with you, and then you're going to be trying the right column on your own. And just a reminder to please write your name at the top of each paper, and it should be written in pen as well. Thank you. All right, so the first problem we are solving by factoring. So that means we need to set up our box and diamond. We have our first term in the first box, 4x squared. Our last term in the last box, we can multiply them. That goes to the top of the diamond, 4x squared. And then we always place our middle term, that would be 5x here, that would go at the bottom of the diamond. So we are looking for numbers that will multiply to 4x squared, but add up to 5. So really the only values that do that would be 1 and 4 and 2 and 2. So let's pick 1 and 4 because 1 plus 4 is 5. So we have a 4x and we have a 1x, or you could just write x as well. They're both positive, and we would place them here. And then to fill out the dimensions here so we can get the product written in product form, we want to look for the greatest common factor between 4x squared and 4x, and that would be a 4x. 4x goes into both of these terms. And now we're looking for the greatest common factor between 4x squared and a 1x, and that would just be x. And then I can fill in the rest of my diamond by multiplying 4x with 1 to make a 4x, and it's a positive 1, and multiplying x with 1 to make a 1x. And then 1 times 1, we can check the last term as well, and that would be 1. Okay, so now we have it written as a sum. Now we want to write our solution as a product. So I'm going to write that up here to give myself some space. So I'd write 4x plus 1 multiplied with x plus 1. And we're going to have that still set equal to 0. So since we're actually solving for this, we need to know what our value for x can be. So I'm going to take each product, 4x plus 1, I'm going to set that equal to 0, because if the number inside this parenthesis evaluates to 0, it'll multiply to some other number, and it'll make a 0. Remember the zero product property. And then my other equation, I'm going to take the x plus 1, and I'm going to set that equal to 0. And then now all I have to do is solve both of these equations. So we can subtract 1 on both sides here. 4x equals -1, and then we can divide by 4. So x is -1/4. That's one option for our answer choice. And if we subtract 1 on both sides here, x equals -1. So these would be our two solutions for x for this factoring equation. Okay, now the next one we're going to do is the quadratic formula. So we have the shell of our quadratic formula here, and I do want you to go through each of the steps so we can verify that you're actually working through that. Might be helpful to grab a calculator, just have that off to the side as we're doing some of our calculations. So first thing you might want to do is identify the a, b, and c. So a is 4, b is 5, and c is 1. And if you'll notice, these equations are the same. And so we want to verify that when we solve it using a different method, we'll get the same solution. Okay. And that will be what happens on the right column as well. So our quadratic formula, x equals -b. So we place our b here, plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay. So then we're going to get -5. Plus or minus the square root of 5 squared, so that's going to be 25. And then we have 4 times 1, that's going to be 16. And we're subtracting 16 here. And then we have all over 8. Okay, so now we just keep simplifying that farther. We have -5 plus or minus, this will simplify to 9 all over 8. And the square root of 9 is 3. So we have -5 plus or minus 3 all divided by 8. So we're going to have two separate answers. So we don't probably even need our calculator here for this. We have -5 plus 3 divided by 8, because this is a plus or minus. And then we have -5 minus 3, all divided by 8. Okay, so with our first one here, we're going to evaluate to a -2/8. And we want to know that these answers are actually the same. So -2/8 does simplify to -1/4. So this solution for x does actually match our answer here. And then when we simplify this, we'll get -8 divided by 8, which is -1. So my solutions for this equation are -1/4 and -1. Okay, so moving on to the second page. Okay, we're going to be looking at graphing from vertex form. I'm sorry, from standard form, ax squared plus bx plus c. And actually, oh, there we go. It's focusing a little bit better here. Okay, so your first step, let's identify a, b, and c. Our a is 2, our b is -16, and our c is 30. Okay, so first thing we want to do is we want to identify that fact that a is positive. That's telling us that it's facing up. Since it's greater than 1, it also tells us that it's a little bit more of a narrow graph. It's stretched vertically is what we would call that. Okay. Now to fill out this table, we need to know what the axis of symmetry is. We're going to place that to the middle of our table. So we place -b, so we put the b here, over 2a. A is 2. So that's going to give us -32 divided by 4, which is going to simplify out to a -8. So x equals -8. I can place that here at the middle of the table. Let's actually figure out what our vertex is. So that means we're plugging -8 into this equation. You do want to show the work for this when plugging it in. And anytime you see an x, you should be placing a set of parentheses there so that when we square it, we know it's actually going to be a positive. So -16 multiplied with the -8 plus 30. Okay, so now we're just going to put this into our calculator. So we have 2 -8 squared -16 times a -8 plus 30. And this is going to give us 286. I'm going to pause this video and see if that was actually what we wanted to make that value of. All right, so I'm back. Miss Reese made a mistake here. Maybe you noticed it. You're probably saying, what? How did we get 32? So this is not 32. We have just negative times a -16. That's 16. If we were in class, hopefully you would have said, raised your hand and said, Miss Reese, what's going on here? So actually, our axis of symmetry is going to be 16 divided by 4, which is 4. So that's going to change when we plug in our value here. All right. So I'm going to go back into my calculator. I'm going to plug in a 4, and we're going to see if that vertex makes sense. So sometimes when you make mistakes like this and you get 286, you might say to yourself, okay, maybe let me go back and check my work. Okay. So let's change this -8. I'm going to delete that negative because we're not going to be a negative. I'm going to change it to a 4. I'm going to delete my negative here and then make it a 4. And then, -2. Okay, I think that'll fit on the graph. There we go. So after 4, we're going to try plugging in 5 and 6, and we're going to plug in 3 and 2, and you can put that kind of in any order on your table. Okay. So now all I need to do is go back in and change the input values from a 4 to the different values on our table here. So I highlighted that line, and now I'm going to change that and plug in a 2. And I'm going to change this to a 2. We're going to get 6 here. Now we'll plug in 3. Go back in and change these to 3s. We'll get a 0. And then we should be plugging these two values in. Let's just do this to make sure. Push the up arrow and enter. And let's plug in a 5. And oh, good, we got to 0. So now we really know that we're setting this graph up correctly. Let's push enter here, a 6, and let's make that a 6. Okay, great, and we're getting the value of 6 out of that as well. Okay, so a few things that we can identify. Our axis of symmetry, we had x equals 4, x equals 4. Our vertex was at 4, -2. Because this parabola faces upward, that point at the bottom of the parabola, that's the lowest point. We call that the minimum. So this graph has a minimum, okay? And I'm just going to add on here domain and range, and you should find that on yours as well. Domain is all real numbers. I can input any value into this quadratic equation. And the range, because this is an upward facing parabola, this is the lowest value for y, and I can see the lowest value for y on my table is a -2. So y is greater than or equal to -2. And now my last step is just to go ahead and plot all of these coordinate points onto my graph. So I have a point at 2, 6. We've got a point at 3, 0. A point at 4, -2. 5, 0. And 6, 6. And then I would just connect them with a curve to create a parabola. And there we go.